these kinds of characteristics that I've sketched out here are ones that we've found illustrated in lots of the comments that we've elicited from people in doing the surveys. There's a couple important points to note about it. On the one hand, the different elements of these two categories, or this typology, seem to have a kind of coherence, a kind of elective affinity. So the ways in which people have a view of space and time, and attitudes about knowledge and so on, all seem to sort of work together for the two. But on the other hand, the reality is that according to our data, 58% or so, over half of the people in the county that are burning wood, in most cases, also burn something else. And in most cases are participating sort of in both cultures. So there are a variety of puzzles for us as to just what's the nature of these two sort of cultural stereotypes or archetypes that I've just sketched out for you, and what are the implications in terms of social change. Drawing on sort of participant observation and on informal conversations with a variety of folks who've been working, for example, on food systems in the area, in Hancock County, have a pretty strong impression that there's a significant correlation between the people who are doing the self-reliant Maine Yankee kind of practice with regard to their heating, and folks who are trying to grow their own food or are involved in regional efforts to become more self-reliant as a county and in our food system. And some correlation also between people who are sort of modern consumers of energy and modern consumers of food that's distributed through major food market systems and so on. And it would seem likely that that there would be connections also to things like education, attitudes towards homeschooling, or else participation in local schools, entertainment. People who like to contra dance tend to burn wood, for example, where contra dancing is viewed as a kind of do-it-yourself, self-reliant kind of entertainment. You know, your friends and neighbors make the music, and somebody calls it, and you all dance together, rather than sitting at home and watching step dancing on television or the like. We haven't gone very far beyond sort of the anecdotal information and informal discussion and participant observation in terms of looking at those kinds of connections, but they would seem to be there. In U.S. culture, it would seem that there's some kinds of splits like this one between two forms of cultural practice associated with heat here in Hancock County that I've described, that are characteristic of people nationwide in terms of their attitudes towards food systems, health, and so on. And it was very interesting. I gave a version of a paper on this cultural typology at a Society for Human Ecology conference in April of 2011. And there were some researchers from California who'd been studying heating practices out in California. Very different kind of physical and social landscape. But they were really struck with the contrast, and it seemed to fit some of their observations. But they wanted to suggest that it was a mistake to refer to the down east or Maine Yankee self-reliant families. They wanted just more as sort of self-reliant families as a more general category that could apply nationwide to people. My own sense of this so far is that the kind of practice that we're talking about is something that varies by region, but has sort of national connections of different sorts, so that I would expect that, for example, in California, you might find that there are traditions going back to the Hispanic settlers that might provide ways of looking at how you heat and also cool your house. That would be sort of regional in character, and they could draw on regional images, ideas, values, and a sense of identity or a sense of place. There might also be in California something like what you might think of as kind of a hacker culture, especially up in the San Francisco area, for example, where the sort of do-it-yourself approach in dealing with software and hardware with regard to computers might feed into the way that people approach heating and cooling their houses, or providing their own food and so on. And so it might well be that in different parts of the country in the U.S. and even globally, that you'd find similarities between cultures that emphasize self-reliance and a sort of this core metaphor of heating or food or other things as being practices that you perform rather than services that are provided by professionals. You might find that kind of contrast taking lots of different forms and involving different kinds of cultural identities that are related but distinct. And insofar as you want to promote one or the other cultural practice, it seems to me that probably it's useful to draw on local senses of identity, local senses of place, local language, local specific practices. So the particular kinds of trees that grow in Maine and the ways in which they grow, even the things that grow in Hancock County are going to be somewhat different than those from other parts of the state, let alone other parts of New England. And so having a sort of regional identity and pride may feed into the character of the practices. Are they, for example, Weberian ideal types, sort of like the Protestant spirit, the Protestant ethic, or the spirit of capitalism, or the charismatic or bureaucratic authority type in Weber? Are they some kind of essence that's unchanging or fixed of a kind of ideal type? Or are they more just kind of stereotypes, kind of composites that are being projected onto people and that people may adopt and project onto themselves? Are they behavior patterns that are more like sort of an accent, where there are a lot of different elements to the behavior, different ways people pronounce their vowels, or drop their consonants, and so on, and these sort of vary in a very fluid and open, variegated way across the landscape, across the United States, for example. And maybe these two cultural patterns are just sort of clusters or clumps of these varied behaviors. Or maybe the two, the way I've characterized them, are really more about a kind of sense of place. Or they may really be more about visions of the good life. So that it's almost a sense of community design and vision that comes from a moral vision or a community vision. Or they may just be lifestyle options in some sense. Or they may be something much more fundamental. They might be ways to give meaning to being. The way in which you understand what it is to be a human is very different when you're participating in the modern consumer family way of enframing your world with technology and having services provided to you, rather than understanding what it is to be a human being when you view it as not being a matter of buying what you need or want, but a matter of doing things and taking part in practices that create self-reliance. And I really don't know. I mean, I think there may be ways in which these two could be all those to some extent. it's a puzzle, and how they're related is interesting to think about.